Hi, everyone. Hello. Welcome to today's Visas.AI Attorney Collab. Today's spotlight guest is Attorney Delali Dagadu, who is a managing principal attorney at Dagadu Law, licensed in the District of Columbia and Maryland. She is a Liberian American immigrant and a lawpreneur, as she likes to call it. She likes to advocate and defend non-citizens. Growing up in five different countries on three continents has taught her the true meaning of diversity, and so she's brought her international upbringing to her career and wants to change the world through her career. The Jadu Law, just a little bit of a background about it, is a full service immigration law firm located in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. And then in their practice, they have six values that I'd love to ask her to share with us. But with that being said, welcome to today's Visas.AI attorney collab. Uh, Attorney Delali Dejadu, thanks for joining us.
You for having me. I am excited to be here today. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Wonderful.
You mentioned so it's Dagadu law. I don't know if I heard you correctly. Just it's
I
Dagadu
I
law.
butchered the
Just
name.
as a
Sorry
short
about
name.
that. Thank you
No
so much.
worries.
Dagadula. It's a good correction
Dagadu
there.
law. It's a great way to start. So
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
I'm excited to talk about immigration, the practice of immigration law at Dagadu law firm. So I'm ready. Whatever question you
Wonderful.
have.
Thank you for that. Well, I did want to ask you actually to kick us off, the six values that you really like to share at your firm. They've been really intriguing to me when I read about them. Do you want to talk a little about that?
Yes. So the first, and all of this, the my six core principle in reference to Dagadu law practice is all starting from my law school, UDC Law School, the clinical program. So they taught us these values, and I made it my own. UDC Law is such a program that they teach you how to put your passion into action. So starting off is client center. It's not about me. It's about you, the client. It's very important that client understand that they're not coming in with just paying a fee, but that it's all about them from the beginning to the end. It's all about them. So that's our first value in reference to client center, and it's dedication. Immigration is so close to my heart. It's because I'm an immigrant, as you read of. It's everything to me. I've lived in five different countries, one of them being the United States, and I know the system. I've gone through the system. So to be dedicated to this work, you have to have something coming. You have to have a skin in the game. So for me, the dedication to my client's immigration case is very, very important. So that's our second value we're going through. So we have four more to go. Diligence. So anyone who knows me, you go back to my law school, UDC Law, they would tell you that I'm very particular. Diligence. When you look at an immigration case, you have to do your due diligence as an attorney. You're not just taking a case and say, okay, stamp and fill out the form. It's not about the form. It's about doing your due diligence, doing the homework behind everything to make sure that your client get the best service ever. So diligence is up there. That's why it's number three. Then it's passion. You can't do anything without passion.
Mm,
Immigration is passionate for me because I've been through the system and I love. And if you come in my office, you say I have maps all over the place in all the countries I've lived in, all the countries I've traveled in. It's passion. So with passion, you can find the best solution for your client. You have to be committed. You have to have passion. Then we move on to, responsiveness. I've heard a lot of law firm that I worked at, I've heard clients who get frustrated because no one is following up with them. They submit the application and no one called to say, okay, it's been a month, we still haven't heard anything. Nobody follow up. You know, Immigrants are people. When you go to the doctor, you put in your test. You will be hoping the doctor follow up with you and say, okay, this is what we're still waiting for the results, but don't worry, we got your back, right? So at Dagger Law, it's very important that we have that responsiveness, like following up with the client, even if we don't have results. USCIS will say you have 12 months of processing, right? But for me, I like to check in with my client every month. A little bit I can do, right? And just follow and say, hey, haven't heard anything, but we're still checking for the status. So responsiveness is very, very important because people want to know, and empathy. you can't do anything without empathy. You know, some people go, well, I don't have empathy. It's different from sympathy. Empathy is saying that I know what it's like. And I can truly say this because I'm an immigrant. You know, I know what it's like. I know what it's like to be in limbo. I know what it's like to be waiting and don't know when your family is going to be reunited with you. I know what it's like. So I can honestly tell my clients, I feel you. I'm sad with you. I understand. I know what it's like. So that's empathy.
Beautiful.
Above all, you know, so that's the sixth core principle that we live by at Dagadu. And again, I couldn't have put this forward without my law school UDC law. So thank you for having me share that with the audience today.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful. I actually love that we have more attorneys. I know they're all eager to also come in and talk about their values and how similar they are. Yet yours are really unique in a perspective. But one thing that's very common that I hear is passion, right? Without passion, the journey becomes much more difficult for you, for your clients, and that's kind of where I personally, I am an immigrant as well. I love the idea of working with more medium scale firms rather than large ones that you're just a number in the system. So I love that you truly carry that. I want to transition us into another question, this is addressed to you as our spotlight attorney. How did you get into law in general, and what captivates you specifically about immigration law?
How I got into law. Well, we'll take it a little bit back to my childhood. I was one of those kids, like on the playground, I will always defending other people and myself. I couldn't stand bully. So as I grew up, you know, I realized that defending and advocating for others is just something I do naturally. And so I realized I can have a greater impact with a law license legally. And I like to say, I hope I can say this. I like to say that I have a license to legally kick ass. Yeah, so it's very it's very important for me that if I'm going to go out there and fight for people, I need the law behind me. So for me, that's how I got into law, because it's natural for me to stand up for others and with passion defend myself and defend other people. What captivates me in reference to immigration law, you know, other than the fact that I'm an immigrant and everything, is the complexity and the reward for in immigration law. The complexity, we all know, if you practice immigration law, is very complex. It's not just filling out a form, but when you get that reward, it's an affirmation that you are seen across the border, right? Immigration law, when done right, brings hope to people. It brings stability, security, safety, freedom. You know, that is why I love immigration law, because people are coming from all walks of life seeking these fundamental um, values that
Right.
I'm able to help them get with the law. So that is what captivates me about immigration law.
Fantastic. Great answer. I want to bring in our founder at Visas.AI, John Velie, an attorney that's been practicing for 30 years. I know he loves to ask the question about what's your favorite case been. So, John, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Pierre. Yeah, Delali, great stuff, and love hearing about Dagadu law and how you're into it. We're sort of geeks about this stuff. Uh, my great grandfather was an immigration attorney back around the 20s, and then was involved in helping his people, my descendants, which were Jews left after the Holocaust, that while America and the Allies fought to stop the Nazis, nobody wanted the poor homeless people that were left after they lost their home. So he was very influential in that. And I'm a third generation immigrant, and Gabby, my daughter, is fourth. But we still know the cause, and we still feel it, and we still love to help the next generation of Americans come here. So really great to see your passion, and we've
Yeah.
seen a lot of this. Yes is part of this. Folks that come over here and they help others come, right? And that's a really neat, and we love that. And our, over our history, we've had a lot of people that have been immigrants themselves wanting to help immigrants. So I see that. I see your passage. I like your thing that you said. You have a license to legally kick ass. So that brings me to the question: is what kind of cases are you legally kicking ass in? What's your component of immigration, and how have you had some successes there?
Yes, so I do a lot of family immigration based petitions. So green card, I have done some employment, but my focus mainly is family immigration. I do asylum hand in hand with family based immigration.
Right.
You asked for, I believe you asked me my favorite cases, correct?
Sure. Well, I wanted to hear of an ass kicking where where you put
So
that
yes,
logic to use, and you got the result and made your clients happy.
yes. So in case where the petition, she self-petitioned, 20 years ago, she did everything on her own. And then coming to get her citizenship, it was discovered that she didn't have her green card the legit way, right? There was an error, misrepresentation. So I finally got the case after three other attorneys have tried to take a look at it. And I finally got her. And I looked at it, I said, oh my gosh, I think we have this result. So we went to bat for it. And she was afraid. She was like, oh my God, I can't, she couldn't sleep. And so we really
Right.
went to war on this. We worked really hard to make sure that we find a waiver for her. So that was one of the things that we were able to go. She was in removal proceedings, so we were able to go
Mm.
to court and fight, using the law in reference to waiver, and she was able to be successful. So I was excited I was able to do that for her because now she's still here with her family.
So Delali,
Other cases.
what we like to do here is kind of dig into the nuances of this, right? Because we're lawyers trying to help lawyers. Other lawyers will watch this. Take us through the mechanics of that. What kind of waiver was it? What is the standards of that waiver? How did you argue it, and why were you successful?
Oh wow. So it's called a 237A1H.
Okay.
So it's a waiver in reference to misrepresentation. So the misrepresentation is you have to show the representation did occur. You have to show that there you are you either had the green card or you had the permanent residency, and that misrepresentation occurred. You also have to show that you do have either a U.S. citizen spouse or a
Mhm.
green card spouse or U.S. citizen child or a green card child, and that the removal of you will be extreme hardship on
Sure.
your U.S. citizen spouse. And so having all these elements met, then you can go forward with a strong argument as to first, we have to show that yes, the misrepresentation occurred, but it was an error unbeknownst to the individual who committed the error, that it wasn't intentional. So we have to show sort of the intent in there. It wasn't intentional. And after that, we have to show that, look, the petitioner, the applicant, has a family over here who's a U.S. citizen, and that if this person is taken, if she's taken out of the country, if she's removed from the country, they will suffer. And she's
Yeah.
also being here, and it's also a discretional waiver. So you have to show with everything taken in the totality of the circumstances, with everything taken into consideration, that this individual greatly deserves this waiver,
So
but for
yeah.
the error.
So on the misrepresentation, I assume not all misrepresentations are equal. Is there a line of a type of misrepresentation that would be okay and acceptable as long as there's a hardship, and others that are like, no way, you misrepresented so badly that you hit some standard, whether it's fraud or something like that? When you're deciding to do this case and argue this case, tell us about the levels of misrepresentation, if that's even how you look at it.
Well, what I was looking at, because I knew it was a discretional waiver, the first thing I looked at was, okay, was that a misrepresentation? It was fraud. It doesn't matter, right? It's
It
fraud
doesn't. Okay.
misrepresentation. So in this case, she was categorized as committing a fraud.
Oh, okay.
She misrepresented it and it was a fraud. And so we had to show that, yes, first you have to admit to it,
Mm-hmm.
and then use all the other factors that will mitigate that fraud, that
Okay.
it's not, as long as you haven't committed a crime in to the extent of murder and stuff like that,
Right.
but it was a fraud. And this fraud can be waived because if you look at the totality of the circumstances, that it was an innocent mistake, it was a fraud nevertheless,
Right.
according to USCIS.
So levels of fraud come into consideration as well. If it was protracted multiple times, I guess would be part of it. Is there also how long ago this happened and what kind of life they've lived since? Are those factors?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, those are all the mitigating factor that come into play. So, the fact that this individual had been in the country for so long, that's
Hmm.
taken into consideration. It occurred a long time ago, and also the fact that she was doing this pro se.
Yeah.
Came into factor that it
Yeah.
wasn't. She was not even aware that this fraud was committed.
That's great.
So all of that, you have to make a strong argument. It's there, but if you don't make the passionate, the emotional argument to that effect,
Hmm.
it's just going to be there, and it
Right.
can hurt the client. But you have to take it and make the best out of it. Yes, it has been committed, but what can we do with it? How can we mitigate this circumstances, this fraud?
So in litigating, or not litigating, in adjudicating this case, was this done in paper or was it done in front of a judge, or both?
Both.
Okay.
First, you have to make the emotional brief appeal
Right.
and then go before the judge and make the argument. So it's one thing to write it as, another thing to appear in court with your client and for the judge to see the client, for the client to testify,
Right.
and for you to put the client in the best light. So, yeah, we had to do both.
Great. It's a fascinating story. And if it was one of the ones that you count as the one you kicked ass, I guess you got the right result. She's in this country.
I did. I did.
Wow.
I did. She was like, "You were furious." I was like, "Well, I was still trying to be nice for you."
Right. Well, that's really the goal,
We
isn't it? I
went in
mean,
there.
Awesome.
you have to be able to articulate for your client. You have to get your
Absolutely.
point. You have to be persuasive. Sometimes it's not as easy as just going in there and blustering like a bulldog, but sometimes you got to fight, right? So that's wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
love
And
it.
this
Great story.
this waiver is complex to the extent that it's not used a lot, it's
Hmm.
rarely used.
Right.
And so you have to go in knowing it and being able to advocate it and educate the person who you're working with.
We'd love to learn more about it. As a matter of fact, we just started adding waivers to our platform at Visas.AI. We just added the 212 waiver. We added the 601 and the 601A just this last week. So as we've been growing this out, we're into a space that doesn't exist, right? So prior to us, and the reason we've done what it is because we found that so much of immigration wasn't covered in the software platforms, right? They were the forms. And I loved what you talked about. It's not just forms, because that's what we say. And what I want to tell you this story because I think I love how you think about your business. And I'm not sure that lawyers do that very often. I think most of us, we look at our craft, like we look at litigating for our clients. That's our goal. We don't think that we're running a company, and that company has to have things that you call core principles. We call core values, right? Those are terms that other companies define, right? I love that you got yours from your law school. Like when you were in school, you like, here's how I want to be a lawyer, and I'm going to take this with me. So you took your learnings into your company. So what we call core values spell out Chicago, and none of us are from Chicago. But it just was easy to remember it, right? And that's one of those things. You get these companies that say, here's the core values of the companies, and it's on a poster in a big company, and like nobody knows what they are, right? So ours are creative thinking, hard work, integrity, compassion, achievement, grit, and optimism. And we try to keep talking about those in the firm, and we like other people in our company to recognize when somebody else did that. We talked today in our we have a daily scrum about grit, and those sort of things. So I love that you're doing that with your business, right? Because that's what it is at the end of the day. Even though you're doing this craft, you're running a business, and obviously you want it to be a profitable one. So bravo on that. I loved hearing that. So uh, thank you. That's why we like having different lawyers on this. We want to see where you're coming from and how you got there, right? So it's obvious in where you came from, why you would do immigration law, but that doesn't mean you're going to be a good immigration lawyer at all. It just means that you have an interest. So there's the will, and then there's the ability, right? And you have to have both, and the passion gets you from one to the other, I think, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, it's
I
fun.
love it. Well, we're moving along very nicely into this conversation. I do want to squeeze in a personal question that isn't on the plan, but it came out, and I think it's a great time to ask it. When it Attorney Delali, when it comes to understanding the law, as someone who's a non-attorney, I've seen immigration attorneys speak and be very confident in their arguments. But when it comes to immigration and how it's changing, would you say that overall the spectrum is it's becoming more difficult, it's becoming easier? And how does every administration with you change how your cases are handled?
Great question. I would say this. It's it's changing rapidly. That's immigration law. Immigration law changes. It's like you have to, okay, the form has changed. You have to make sure you have the right form. That's just the form, right? The
Right.
law is changing constantly. You know, every administration want to add in the administrative law. Um, when that's what I usually advise my client, that don't, just because someone else say this or you learn this on YouTube, make sure you talk to an attorney because they understand what is the new changes. You have to be, you have to follow up. You have to follow up to know what is changing in the law. It's not straightforward, but it's changing for the better, I think. I believe I'm an eternal optimist. I believe it's changing for the better. I believe more people are learning because of social media, because of what you guys are doing. More people are getting to understand. Non-lawyers are getting to understand, but still, to go forth and do it on your own can be very tricky. So I never advise clients to go you have a consultation first, right? It is changing, and I hope it continues to change in a way that it makes humane sense. I advocate
Mhm.
for humane immigration reform, not just reform. Immigration reform that takes into the consideration the dignity of people coming from all walks of life across the border. Whether you took a plane to get here, whether you took a boat to get here, or cross the desert, you have to have humane immigration reform. So I hope the change goes to that direction. But again, every administration is different, every Congress is different. We get to see
It's
immigration
excellent.
reform passed, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting because currently it's funny. We hear a lot from audiences asking a lot of questions, and most of the questions are usually, "How long does this form take? How long will I have to wait?" And really, I'm learning that there's no answer because John, if you remember, we spoke a few collabs ago about the I-131, the travel document, and how it usually takes people 8 to 12 months.
Yep.
Well, we filed my I-131 a month ago, and it was approved yesterday, and that was so
Congratulations.
fast.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such
Hey,
a quick, and they also
Congratulations.
that
Way to
doesn't
thank
happen
you.
casually
very
drop that,
often.
Pierre.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, nice.
Just casually
Nice.
dropped that, and it was in 1 month. I mean, it's insane how there isn't really a formula, right? Some people that are still waiting from December 2022,
Yeah.
and yet it happens. So
It's
that was fast.
it's funny, this administration, right? So every administration has some anti-immigration element to it, right? That's what we understood. I remember watching the election count, and I do a lot of H-1Bs, Delali, and I was like, the H-1B's done if Trump's reelected. And so when Biden won, I was like, hooray. But the Biden administration, this is really interesting to think about, has its own issue with H-1Bs, right? And one of the
Yeah.
things is, and it's important to know why, because it helps you, when you think about why, it helps you articulate your client's position, right? So one of the reasons why is that the Biden administration is backed by labor unions. And labor unions, they love immigrants, they love green card holders because they can be in their unions, but they don't like H-1Bs and they don't like H-2Bs. They look at them in a scab. And they're absolutist, right? They're all about the highest amount of money they can get for their constituents. And I understand that's their model, right? But they also have a great deal of support in this administration. And so we see the H-1B is under fire. And the difference between the two administrations, this is fascinating to me, is the Trump administration didn't really like law or government. So it would make presidential decisions, right? Here's how we're going to handle this, which were really devastating at times, but all you had to do is take them to court, and they didn't follow the rules, right? So they're like, throw the whole thing out, which was like, you'd be knocked down for a minute. The Biden administration, Biden's been in government for 40 years. This guy knows exactly how to do it. So the irony is they're taking Trump administration methodology and doing it through the notice and comment process, that if this finishes, then it's locked in. And it's like, wait a second, this guy was outwardly antagonistic towards us, but we were going to win. This is scarier, right? And we're seeing more site investigations and things like that. So there's always somebody that's anti-immigration in both sides of our two major parties. And so this makes our job more complicated. It also gives us a job, right? And we can complain about it, or we can find solutions for our clients no matter what the scenario is, because they're not going to turn the faucet off. They're not going to say nobody's going to come back in. We are still a nation of immigrants. And for the most part, we can get most of our clients in. We just have to do this. But I wanted to ask you, because you said you're into asylum, about an asylum case we have. Really interesting case. We got a gentleman approved for, I think, a P1 or maybe an O1 or maybe P3. I don't know. He's an entertainer. I forget what the type of visa we got approved, but he kept being turned down by the consulates. On what did no I'm conflating cases. Never mind. He is in the United States. He has been in the United States over a year. He attempted a visa like this and was denied. Okay, so he did not file his asylum case within 1 year. However,
get that line.
He's from a country, and he's famous in his country, right? He's a musician, as we said, famous in his country, and the group that was in power was using his music to run for election. I'm not going to talk about his country. I think that's too close to confidential. But in his country, he's a star. The governing body was in it. Once that they lose, he becomes an enemy. And one of his another singer that he produced an album goes back to his country and is murdered under conspicuous things. His petitioner has been his producer has been threatened. His family is living in hiding. My issue that I'm struggling with, would love your insight, is the 1 year to file an asylum case, except for exigent circumstances. How would you argue the exigent circumstances here, counselor?
At the time, this was not happening. At the time that he passed the 1 year deadline, so we're over that. But now, circumstances have changed.
Okay.
Proof: the friend or one of you say his partner, right, got murdered.
The guy he produced from his group, and this is a group. It's in a country in which they're not just political things. There's tribes involved, right? So he's from the wrong tribe. This guy's from the tribe, politically other side.
Right. So there's the political change. I mean, I will argue in terms of there's new political power in place. Yes, you missed the deadline, but now there's no way this man can go back, especially when we have the evidence that one of his co-producer or his partner in the music business has actually been murdered. There is no way, you can send this person back. So I'm going to argue on that evidence, strongly on that evidence, and the fact that this is a change that can go over the 1 year filing deadline. I hit the 1 year filing deadline. I've advocated for the 1 year filing deadline. The 1 year filing deadline is not right. And one of the arguments that I make is that a lot of people come to this country, don't realize that they have an asylum case, or they talk to people who are not immigration attorney, and they're taken around and around before they realize that the 1 year has passed. They're screwed. Right? Because they don't know. It takes some time for people to even understand the language, or understand the system, the complexity of it. So I don't believe in a 1 year filing deadline, but I'm glad there's an exception in reference to the case right now. I would definitely hang on the fact that this change, the political change, has definitely will cause him to fear for his life.
So we could toll the 1 year until maybe the date of the election, or when the event started happening. Right. So
it changes right there.
That changes there. Then that's the 1 year. Is there an argument that can be made that he attempted another visa process and it was unsuccessful?
Well, why would you bring in the other visa in when you're dealing with asylum, right?
I'm just wondering if he chose. He could have filed it. Well, I don't think he could have filed asylum until the problem became a problem. That's due. Right. And I was going to lean with where I think you're going with this. But the fact that you chose immigration path 1 and it didn't work doesn't toll that 1 year on its own, does it?
No, no, the fact that you are here and things have changed. I mean, for example,
Yeah.
you have someone who comes to the US planning to go back and then find out that there's a coup and
Right.
their parents, they've been here for over a year in school and everything, never apply for asylum. Then there's a coup. They know that, you have 1 year from the day the coup started and you know that you fear for your life to apply for that asylum. If that time passes,
Then you're out.
when did you know that your family life were in danger? When did you know that they were hunting down your family because of their political affiliation?
Yeah.
Then you have to
Exactly.
apply within the time that you knew something happened.
So let's talk about the machinations of that. So we make this argument, we submit this case. Now, here's a really interesting thing. The way we got into asylum was fairly recently, and we got involved in the Afghan asylums. The Afghan asylums under a thing called OAR, Operation Ally Rescue, really expedited it, at least theoretically. It stopped expediting it, but when we first began, we were getting notices to appear in front of adjudicators within 45 days, right? It was fantastic. Now that is delayed. So what we did to create that's why one of the impetuses of the platform we built was we write briefs, right? So we have about a 25-page asylum brief that we put everything in because we knew, unlike other asylum cases, we weren't going to be able to augment. And we had witness statements in it, so we can build those out. We had some sort of doctor or psychiatrist statements that we build out and we put in there. We did all of that, right? We put all the information about the country and all those in, and we submitted, and knock on wood, we got every one of them approved. And we got some great feedback from our adjudicators that they had never seen anybody attach it. And what we basically did is, the laws of Webb, we took our strategies from briefing out EB1s and really complex visas into the other types of visas, into the H-1Bs, even Bs, and then into asylum. And so I wanted to ask you this, is these other asylum cases can be protracted for years. How long from your filing do you really expect to get in front of a judge or an adjudicator on an affirmative asylum filing?
It varies. I honestly, I'm not in a position to put a time on it because USCI has their own timeline. But
Yeah,
for example, I have a client right now who had filed 6 years ago. She came to me after two other attorneys, and I'm looking at a case and I say, yeah, we have to do a whole lot of correction. We have to
right.
redo a lot of these things. And it's affirmative asylum. She has a strong case, but she's been sitting on this since,
Six
for
years.
6 years now. And so I'm asking her, I said, look, if you feel you're ready, we can ask for an expedited, but we have
Okay.
to show why we're asking for an expedited resolution on this. Are they going to grant that expedited request? Maybe, maybe not. But it's hard to say that once you put in an affirmative asylum application, you're going to get it. The Afghan case, I think, is a special case
Mm-hmm.
that was carved
Has its
out
own.
for the Afghan
Yeah.
because of, yeah, coming out. But there are still some Afghan that, for example, a client that I escorted to interview, he's still waiting.
Yeah.
He's still
No kidding.
waiting. He's still waiting. It's really hard. And I have clients who was like, when am I going to hear back? When are they going to? I was like, I do not know. I don't control that. We can ask, but and then you try to ask, so well, we're still processing. That's the frustrating part of it. But it's hard to put a time on it as to
Yeah.
from you filing when you get in front of the asylum office, and then that's just the asylum office. Then you have to deal with the court. That's a totally different matter. You're
Mm-hmm.
looking at years, if not, 3, 4 years. You're looking at years before you get in front of the judge. But I cannot put a time on it, and it's frustrating,
Now, for
frustrating for my
people that
clients.
don't know asylum and they're checking in, and this is what we always do: we get in the weeds, and then we go back out and try to talk about the forest a little bit. When you file an asylum case, do the applicants of this get the ability to work? How does that work?
Okay. Great question. And a question I have a lot of people asking me too.
Mhm.
So once you file the 589, which is the asylum form, once it's one thing to mail it or submit it. It's another thing for it to be accepted to say it has been filed. You
Mhm.
know it's filed when you get the receipt notice. Once you file it, there's something we call the asylum clock. That clock starts to tick. in terms of your work authorization. So you have the clock has to take until it's 150 days, right? So we're looking at 5 months if we do the calculation. So once you reach the 150 days, then you can submit your application. Between that time, you've already gone for your biometric, and then you can file for the employment authorization, which is the golden the magic beans or whatever you want to say, the golden
Magic
egg
bean.
for a lot of them be able to work.
So what's
So
what's
once you
that
file
form, Delali? What's that form number? Do you know?
765, form
765.
765, that's the employment authorization application. So once you file the and do everything and it's correct and they accept it, you have they will hold on to it for another 30 days. So you're looking at a total of 180 days before you get your work authorization,
Yeah.
provided everything is done right. There's no issue. You get your work authorization.
Unless you're Pierre, then you get it really quickly.
Yeah, you know, if you're when you mentioned I-131, I actually had same thing happen. I had a client who I had to do it for, and they got it within a month too. But it was an expedite humanitarian parole request,
And I also
so it
I
is
didn't
possible.
mention, but I also so John, I couldn't finish because I didn't remember the name, but both I-131 and 765 were approved yesterday. So now that's a combo
Yes,
card, right? Of some sort.
yes,
Thank you
Yeah.
guys.
So
yes, yes.
again, to go back into the weeds or explain. So the I-135 and I-765 are often filed. That's work and travel permission that are filed in a
Mhm.
number of different instances. So in a typical
Yes.
adjustment of status, and that means adjusting from a non-immigrant or a temporary work card to a permanent one, whether family based or employment based, which is either
Or DV.
I-130 for family or I-140 for one of the EBs, which are employment based. You would file those two documents or those two forms at the same time. And what we're seeing today is how, USCIS is all over the place on how long it takes to do these things. And our clients, they want real answers. And what they always do is, well, my friend got it. Right.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, that
Yes.
can happen. But so, what do we
It's
do?
not a
So
queue.
what do
It's
you do
not a
with government
perfect queue,
agencies,
and they're
right?
just taking them. Exactly.
Right. So that's great
Yes.
stuff. Um, well, Pierre, where do you want to go next?
Thank you, John. So I have some great questions on the agenda for today that we still haven't gotten into. Maybe we can ask Attorney Delali, what is something that you wish artificial intelligence and technology can solve and or assist when it comes to your law practice? And you can be as specific as what you need in your law.
Okay. We at Dagadu Law, we love AI and technology. Can do with that. Something that I wish AI technology can resolve is status progression between attorney and USCIS. I want to be able to file my case, right, and have the ticket number connected to the progression of my case, my client's case, that I can see the progression. I can know where it's at. I don't want to go on the website and see a generic status update that doesn't tell me where my case is at in the queue. Just to have that communication between USCIS and an attorney once you submit a case, especially when you submit a case online, will be really, really helpful because sometimes we're operating in the dark. You submit a case and you're sitting, waiting, twiddling your fingers, like waiting. And then your clients are like banging on your door, like, let me know, when is my kid's going to be approved? I don't know. I'm waiting. I'm also waiting. I have the same results like you get. So
I think
just to have,
Yeah, Delali, I
go
think
ahead.
you're wishing for something that won't happen by
I
design.
know.
Right? So I love
I
how you
know.
said, I wish the government would use AI, right? I think what we're dealing with is the government doesn't want to be efficient about this. They are
Ooh.
completely fine leaving people waiting because I don't think they want to process people quickly. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think that's their goal, is to do the job fast. I do think that the Biden administration, as opposed to the Trump administration, doesn't want to kill it, right? They do want to get these forms out quicker. And I think, Pierre, you getting your form back quickly is actually some of the work in progress. Remember, the Trump administration went across a lot of agencies and just ripped them down, right? They fired people out of positions. They didn't rehire people into positions. They're about small government philosophically. And so what that translated into is let's not make these agencies work. I mean, that was their design, right? If you don't like immigration, the best way to hurt it is to rip it from the inside, right? Put somebody in charge of the policies and then knock it down. The Biden administration does want it to work. It does have a commitment to it, but it's understaffed and it doesn't do a good job. Delali, that would be fantastic if they would tell us. But the reason that they don't let us have communication with immigration people, officers and stuff like that, is, I think, by design. It's the black hole, right? We put it in, it comes back, and that's where would you like to see AI on the private side? How could you use AI in your practice to better the services that you provide your clients?
Oh, AI can be my eye for me.
Yeah.
Eyes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I people think differently, but cannot replace the human connection that I have with my clients, that one-on-one, that empathy that I have. AI and technology cannot replace that. I
100%.
maybe I live to see the day it does, but I do appreciate AI in my practice at Dagadu Law in reference to it being a second eye. I'm only human. There's not everything I'll be able to catch, right? So for me to put out a brief and for AI to say, hey, have you considered this argument? Have you thought of this argument? I've checked your brief. I didn't see this argument. Maybe you should look into this argument. This argument may be stronger than this argument. I said, oh, I didn't know that. Thank you, AI.
Yeah.
That's how I would love to see AI working with me at Dagadu Law.
I love you say it, because that's what we're doing. And we're very close to release on, we're going to use AI 3 ways, right? We're starting with the RFE responder. And so the first type of AI is when you upload the document, it uses like a scanner type technology, OCR style technology, but it can tell, because of artificial intelligence and what they're called tokens, the difference between an issue and other language. Now, it's fairly simple for us to find those in immigration, because RFEs are lined out and they'll say in bold, here's your issue and you're insufficient because of that, and please give us this, right? It does that. But this simple tool, and the first way we do it is to extract that issue and throw it up and say, here's the issue. But what we found that artificial intelligence is lacking is when it does the job for us, right? And it just says, here's the issue. So the first thing we said is, let's not trust it that it knows the issue. How can we do that? So it puts it in a box, and we can make the box bigger or smaller. And when it's in that box, we can even summarize it if we want. Now, I won't typically summarize it, and here's why. So that is identification of issues, artificial intelligence. The second thing we're doing, which I think is missing, because we're really, what the techies built for us was ChatGPT, where you'd say, answer my RFE. The analogy I like to use, Delali, is like if you hired a brand new law student, they're in their second year, they've never done an immigration, and you send them to the DCU Law School library, and they come back, they're going to have some elements that look like it, but you're going to like, come on, you are so far off here. That's what ChatGPT did, right? It has too much information. It doesn't know how to distill between it. It can't make judgment calls. And the difference between law and a lot of professional knowledge and science or math, let's say math, is math 1 + 1 is always 2, right? Every 100% of the time. What we deal with is gray. And what's gray is that there are laws or facts that are somewhat applicable. And then if we've got one side of the argument, we'll take those facts and we'll say A. And then if we're on the other side of the argument, we'll take those same facts, that same law, and we'll say this means B, right? It is really hard to use a computer to do that. So AI is great, and lawyers are great, but lawyers using AI is better, right? And so here's how we use it. So we have the AI component suggest to us what are the different regulations relating to this issue, what are the different memos that USCIS has developed to interpret that, what are the AAO decisions, whether they're precedent setting or not, and what's the federal case law on this. And then in addition to that, we've been doing what we've been doing for 30 years. We've taken every RFE we've ever answered on every issue and plugged it in the system. And what that allows us to do is not rely on our memory, right? But we call it community answers, is here's how we answered it before, right? And the AI would tell us what was the most similar way that we've answered it before, right? And so we call that community answers for the reason the more people we get involved, they'll add their community answers too. So what you get to see is, well, how did the other attorneys look at this? How did they answer that? And in that way, they're not telling you what it is, but they're giving you suggestions. And now you, based on your ability to think, reason, and apply your craft, would take that information, select what you want, and then we create the answer. And then what we've added to that is now we're the third element of AI, and that's generative AI. ChatGPT is generative AI. It generates answers, right? But instead of just generating it going out and finding the answers, we've reinserted the lawyer in the process, had the lawyer get to look at things, make judgment calls on it, and then press generate so that we can come up with a better answer. That's we agree with you. We don't want to be replaced. We just want to be more efficient, and we want to be better, right? And so if we're more efficient and better, we're going to do a better job than we would have without it. We're either going to have forgotten things if we already knew it, or we just don't know, right? I mean, I just told you that, we had this one type of asylum we know about. We don't know that this other type of asylum. And that happens every single day to the most experienced attorneys. And then even more so for the least experienced attorney. So it shrinks the need for experience, right? By giving the tools there, but it doesn't replace that experience. It doesn't replace that human interaction that we have to have. Because I make this analogy. I was trying to change my airplane reservation, and I don't like when they just do it. I want to talk to an agent. Right. So when they get on the phone,
Yes.
it's the agent. That technology has existed for a long time. So you can't tell me that AI is going to be better than me calling up my lawyer and asking, I want to empathize. I want them to empathize. I want them to understand. A machine will never do that.
Well, that's the whole mission.
You'd be surprised how a lot of you'd be surprised how some attorney think they can actually just have AI do all the work and not check. There's an attorney that got in trouble, didn't check the case law and anything.
Right.
You have to do the groundwork. You have to do the groundwork, but most people most attorneys don't realize that. Do the groundwork, and AI is just there to assist you and carry you along. So
AI is just the next evolution. Before it was Google, right? I mean, before Google, we had to use Westlaw and Lexis. We had to pay a lot of money for that research. Then we were able to just go out. And
I have no idea what you guys are talking about. You lost me there.
And then, so that this is, what we're doing is we're flipping the research on its head, right? Right now, an attorney that's experienced can identify issues, may know the answer. If they don't know the answer, they know where to look for it, right? They go searching, right? But that takes time. And that time we have to pass on to money to our clients. And what we've all kind of experienced is that immigration, when I first started, was about half and half between hourly and case-based or project-based. Now it's almost all project-based. I'm sure there are some firms that do it by the hour, but right now time is our enemy. So we need to be able to not have to research. If somebody can just give me what's the latest law on that, I'm like, oh, that one works or that one doesn't. Here's what I'm going to do. So it really is replacing researchers, not attorneys. Right. And it's replacing some of the time that attorneys have had to use to do research by having that trigger quicker. And so it's suggesting instead of having us go research. That's where we're going with this.
Well, now you have time to spend less time researching, so you have more time to build that relationship and that trust with your client. That's the
100%.
whole purpose. Is the empathy of an attorney or a legal team can never be replaced. This is a very anxiety ridden process. Pierre knows, having going through it right now with our team. Our software allows us to spend more time reassuring him and keeping him updated and building that trust and relationship in less time with the same things over and over again.
100%. And
I
what
appreciate that.
What we've discovered is when the techies were trying to solve our problems, and I love techies, I represent a lot of them, they were solving certain problems such as efficiency and organization, but they weren't resolving our ultimate problem because it's hard. And that's how to get a case approved, right? I mean, they couldn't. It's not their profession, right? So they would have had to hire one of us that wasn't working in the profession, which means it wouldn't be of that level. So that's when I wanted to build our briefing process. When I told you about our briefing process, which I took from litigation into immigration, on top of INS Zoom. and they were closed. And then Tracker said we were open, but it would take more customization on the user side every single case than to build it out. So what we say is, why don't we just build the forms too? Theirs stop at the forms, ours go to all the other documents around it, whether it's a brief or a contract or a business plan or a witness statement or an expert opinion. Any of those things we can build, and we keep adding more and more things. Like I said, we just did these 2 waivers. You've now informed us of another waiver. We can, this ever evolving, and
Right.
build the technology in a way that you can just keep adding it, right? And it's like, oh, here's a new type of case, or here's the case changing. Case laws change. Let's drop it in and change it across the board. That's our vision on this, and it's a lot of fun for us to meet new attorneys, not new attorneys, other attorneys, and how they're approaching what they're doing in their practice, because it helps get the wheel turning on what's the next thing we can do to help.
Thank you, John.
So you're going to add the 237A. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Ahead,
No, please. What form?
I was going to say, so you're adding the 237A1H
got it written down.
waiver to your list.
I think we should add all waivers, and that'll be the next one. All so waivers. We'll build it out and work with you on it. See if we did a good job.
I am very interested, and I would be excited to see it.
Cool.
Thank you.
Well, what we could do is we can go through and show you how we built the 601 and 601A, and then you're like, here's where you want to go with the 237, because they're not too dissimilar. They're still based on extreme hardship. Yes. It's just based on a different reason, right? Instead of misrepresentation, it's breaking a law or some other sort of falling out of status, right? So the great thing about them is they're not massively different things.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for your time. Attorney Delali, we really appreciate you joining. I think today was really exciting for all of us, simply because the conversation went off track, and it's always better when it's off track and more natural, rather than this script of questions and answers. I think we got to know a lot about you and your practice, and it's just the beginning of the iceberg that we're actually gonna look into. So it's awesome, and we'd love to have you in future episodes and speak further. But I do want to give you a chance for your closing remarks on immigration, and if you'd like to talk again a little bit about your practice for everyone listening.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Thank you guys. This has been an amazing opportunity. I'm really, really grateful to be able to share my passion with everyone out there, immigration. At Dagadu Law, it's very important that clients coming through the door understand that they're not alone and that they have someone behind them. We, fighting for people is what we do. And I appreciate the confidence and the opportunity to be able to defend and advocate for my clients out there. Again, I have to give the credit to my law school, UDC Law. The clinical program really prepared me to be able to be the best advocate I can be for my clients, and also to promote justice. And that's what we do as immigration attorney. We're promoting justice for other people to be able to live and work in the United States with freedom and not be afraid, that they're going to be deported and be persecuted wherever they go. So I really appreciate you guys having me on this program. Thank you. It has been amazing.